Ms. Simmons, good to see you. Good to go.
Hello, am I on time? I'm sorry.
Are. Oh, and I just, one final thing before we turn to Ms. Simmons. The reason our school budget, or our school construction thing is the budget, it's the only must-pass bill. It is the budget is the only thing that definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think so. Yeah, a little possible. Ms. Simmons, 461.
Yes.
And I think we're specifically looking right now at the draft, the harassment and bullying amendment. We just heard concerns from the School Board Association. Ms. Siglowski, who I believe was representing all of her. She was representing her counterparts, and so we're going to hear from you, and then we're going to hear from Ms. Garces on this.
Okay, Emily Simmons, Agency of Education. Yes, I've reviewed, thank you for sending over. I've reviewed this draft language, which starts by amending the definition of harassment in the education statutes. And I'm sorry I didn't get to hear Ms. Siglowski's testimony. My schedule didn't allow for it, but I think I could be more helpful if I was maybe responding to some of her points. So feel free to grill me on that.
No, Ms. Siglowski, she expressed concerns moving forward, given that Title IX report won't be out until next month. We probably won't be here. I should also mention that I received correspondence from the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust as well. And so they have some questions, and we'll have them in next week as also. So there's some pushback.
I feel like I am in the loop about those points. I had occasion to talk to Sue yesterday ahead of this testimony. And so my testimony is that the agency is awaiting a new amendments to the federal Title IX regulations from the U.S. Department of Education. My experience when federal agencies are doing rulemaking, they aren't really transparent about an exact due date for their own work, but they have told the media and have signaled that they expect to publish that final rule in May, which is getting sooner and sooner. So not having heard anything, I'm thinking we're about 3 weeks out from seeing those regulations, which will then be binding on our school districts and institutions of higher ed in Vermont. We don't have a draft, so to speak, a markup of what we can expect those to say. So it is a question mark for me. What will the specific amendments look like? It is, I think, likely that the changes we're going to get from the federal administration are going to require changes in our state policy and procedures and perhaps our state law. Not putting that out of the question at all, that we might need to update the Vermont statutes to come in line with those Title IX regulations. And just to step back in case you didn't get this with the earlier testimony, we're talking about our state harassment, hazing, and bullying prevention policy. And when we're talking about prevention of harassment, that's where we have the overlap of Title IX. But I think you probably got that already. So it would be our preference to first receive the federal government's regulations, since they have the most authority out of all of us on this question. Then next session, take up any necessary amendments that if there are any, and also take up this proposed amendment to our harassment definition. I don't know if this proposal will be harmonious with what the feds are going to come out with, or if those two are going to be in conflict with one another, because again, big mystery in May. To add a layer, which is going to sound complicated, but I actually think it's to our advantage, the agency has been working on just some timely needed updates to our state policy on the prevention of HHB for about a year. We got into the stakeholder process of that work in the winter. We were really about to start engaging with a broader group of stakeholders when we found out that the Title IX regulations were coming out this spring. So that caused us to put a pause on that work so that we wouldn't have to go back and do the same engagement and drafting work twice. So how I think that this could work out for all of us is to receive the federal regulations, start up the work again on our state policy, and then look at our statutes. After the statutes are in place next year, finalize the policy. But that's just me if I were queen.
Okay. And we also hope that's the agency's position.
No, that's the agency's position, if they let me be the queen of the state.
Committee questions or comments or concerns for Ms. Simmons? Okay, so do you mind just sticking with us while Ms. Garces speaks as well, testifies as well, just in case there are some questions, any kind of back and forth that we might benefit from having you in the room as well.
Do you like people to leave their camera on so you can see their eyebrows move around, or turn off to be less distracted?
Whatever you would like.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera off, but I'm here.
Okay, Ms. Garces, do you mind joining us at the table?
Thank you.
And Jay, did you want to say a few words? Or are you here for?
Oh, I'm here to show support for the
Ms. Garces' position. So why don't you introduce yourself for the record so that everyone knows that who you are and your agency and what you're here to do.
Thank you very much, Chair Campion. I'm Jay Green. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the policy and research analyst for the Vermont Office of Racial Equity. I'm here. I just submitted a very brief letter of testimony on behalf of the office that has been reviewed and approved by Executive Director of Racial Equity, Susanna Davis. And yeah, I'm here to support the addition of this draft amendment to the Bill H461. The office's position is that this draft language is in line with the first report of the Racial Equity Task Force of the state of Vermont, which was released in September 2020, and that this has been, we've waited long enough to put these protections in place for our students. There are serious mental health impacts of bullying and harassment, and they impact students of color more than white students, and they also impact students with disabilities and students who are LGBTQ+, and of course, students of color can also be students with disabilities or LGBTQ+ students, and vice versa. So that is the office's position, and I'll see to look forward to it on that.
So what's interesting to me that seems to be happening here is, correct me if I'm wrong, we have two agencies in the administration that might be in conflict on this position. The Agency of Education is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Simmons, you're basically saying, hold off, wait until we get some information back. Ms. Simmons? Yep, and also Jay Green is part of the administration, correct? Yes.
The Office of Racial Equity, the Office of Racial Equity is part of the Agency of Administration, which is part of the overall executive branch, but we try to maintain an independence.
Okay. This is just for my notes. This is just for my understanding. Okay. Thank you both. Ms. Garces.
For the record, Amanda Garces, Director of Policy, Education, and Outreach for the Vermont Human Rights Commission. And if I was queen, I would be taking the lives and experience of students who are currently being harassed and harmed, prioritize those lives. And so I think my ADHD brain before coming out was like, testimony from Visbet, change my testimony. So I will submit a better writing just to accommodate some of those points that Visbet just submitted, because I was just reading that before this. So I wanna just say that I just had meetings with students pretty much every day this week about things that are happening. My role as education and outreach, even before the Human Rights Commission takes the case, is to support those families, to say, here are the resources that you have. Once they formally do an intake, I kind of close off, because so that I can have, there's no conflict around that. The cases that are through the HRC are kind of intact. So I hear too many stories. I am with community organizations that are coming with stories. ACLU, the Education Justice Coalition kind of shares the stories. NAACP has stories like every day of cases that might not be able to come in. I also sit in the Bullying and Harassment Council with Sue, with all the Bs, the Agency of Education. Not a lot of progress has been made for the past year. We have been waiting for this policy to change. For the past few months, I think some progress is coming in that council to kind of really work together to see, okay, we're not doing much. What is the role that we're supposed to be doing? How are we really shifting this? What is happening in our schools around bullying and harassment for our protected categories? It's unprecedented, it's hard, and students need support, families need support. I think that often I find myself in the spaces speaking on behalf of families. I really would love to have this space for families to come and share the stories with you, because we often hear from the institutions that are protecting the institutions. So Visit obviously has questions around liability for schools, understandable, that is their thing. For me, it's like questions about how are we supporting the families. It is our job for the Human Rights Commission to advance policies and legislations that are going to protect our students and our most vulnerable Vermonters. So I am hopeful that this conversation continues. The HRC has had a little fun that we are with the Office of Racial Equity to work together on this issue of bullying and harassment. We had allocated some money so that I could actually develop a training for families so that they understand their rights. I had that work on hold because I'm waiting for the policy. That's kind of like, so because we are translating to plain language, then we're translating the curriculum development of it, but it's kind of hard to move when things are going to be changing and I don't have the right tools. So currently, on the current law, schools are expected to create policies, provide the training, hold students responsible for their actions, or spoke with you about all the pieces that connect with HHB. We're not asking schools to do more, we're asking them to shift the way they look at harassment. So that is a little different. Like, it's not more for schools, it's just how they view harassment that is going to be different. So it's like shifting the curriculum and the training that they already do.
Scholarship interest.
Yes.
So the one thing Mrs. Siglowski and others have said now is that we should wait until the Title IX report is back. And I'm sorry if I missed this. Why not wait?
We could wait until next year, but this is not new. This was also last year,
Okay.
and they also testified. So like I am,
Okay.
So
When you say it was last year,
last year there was a bill, the S-103,
Yeah.
which is currently on the House. Also, we had that bill last year. You guys weren't here, but last by.
Yeah.
But it didn't go anywhere, and we had testimony from all the Bs to kind of say no. But
okay.
so I think there is conversations. I think there's gonna be a push. I understand the need to wait for the Title IX changes. I fear that that there's a lot of students just falling through the cracks, right? Because we're not seeing the level of harassment as it should be. So I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, it's yeah,
if waiting, I think that maybe I have to think about it more, just because
Okay.
I was thrown out and talk to our executive director, and see what makes sense, and we can give you that in writing. But for now, I am the story I heard yesterday was just too much for me to be here and say, let's wait,
I
because
understand.
these students can't. So
If we do wait until the Title IX information is received in May, how would that influence what we are doing
if we wait,
if we wait?
until January.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to understand what information will come in May that will then sort of influence what what we may do. Am I the only one wondering that? Everybody's looking at me.
Over one.
Okay, all right. Just to make sure. Okay, please, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, if we wait, so the Title IX changes that the federal government
Yeah.
is doing, it might change the definition of harassment, but it's unclear what they're gonna mean,
Okay.
right? Like, it is unclear, and so,
That's good to know that's what.
it might be.
Sorry.
that it-
I'm just curious, thank you for coming, by the way. You just brought up you've been dealing with a very difficult situation. Is that situation difficult because of the pervasiveness of the action that, and they're waiting for it to become more pervasive before they act? Or is it problematic because the school isn't following proper procedures? Can you give us a little more insight without revealing anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, part of it is that the schools sometimes don't follow the proper procedures. And sometimes they follow the procedures and then they find that there's no severe pervasive because they are looking at that. And my secretary explained a little bit about like how the legal case goes. So this case, and she talked a little bit about what happens when somebody's looking at race and disability and like all the things interconnected and how like they're looking at. So in this case, it's actually one school with 4 cases and of BIPOC students. So it's like who have been dealing with this and the school saying, well, it's not, you know, it's kind of not, and that is, shouldn't say more about the case, but because it's not, you know, like, and that's the thing is that when we are thinking, it's like, it's gonna bring so many cases, many of the families don't wanna have a legal case. They just really want resolution. So for example, it's like, no, we don't want a legal case. We really wanna be seen. We really want this case investigated. We really want to find a way to move forward. Nobody wants to just do a case. It takes effort, you know. Some of our cases are there for 2 years, you know, like it's emotional trauma, all of it. So being able to, for this family in particular, it's really about like, they just don't, they're not seeing it. And I'm like, I see it, you know? And again, like, it's not because that when it comes, like, the doors kind of close for me and I never know what happens in that case until the commission looks at it sometimes 2 years later. So I think it's a work that we have to do as a state to really end the harassment. It's not a shift, you know, it's a culture. And I think by doing these steps, we're opening the door for culture shifts in a way. We're saying it is not, you don't have to wait here. It is not appropriate to say this is not appropriate for this to happen to you. We see you, you know. And we have to be, we have to protect our students.
Yeah, so my chief issue, I guess I'll call it, is you know, not just in this committee, but I feel like in every committee and in many conversations in general, you know, we hear stories about racial harassment, bullying, and all this sort of thing. And often in all these different circles, we talk about how, you know, we need to address it, how we have to do something. And then we have the Office of Racial Equity that does do something. And it, from my standpoint, it's a little frustrating. You know, we have them doing awesome work, and then, you know, we get these suggestions, and, you know, it's, I know this isn't the only time that, you know, they come with a proposal and then it's, you know, all right, we'll study it, we'll wait for a year. And yeah, so it's a little frustrating to watch that happen with the suggestions that come from this office when we're trying to address racial harassment. I mean, we're trying to address it in another bill. We're trying to address all forms of discrimination with 483. So yeah, that's my view.
You can do yours.
Yeah, I was just, so, I just want to understand your frustration a little bit better that, we have this office, they come forward and we should be, correct, I don't know if words are enough, more responsive or respond, yeah.
Frustrated is a strong word. I mean, yeah, I mean, we often talk about addressing racial harassment.
Yeah, yeah,
We have this office.
yeah.
We
Tell
get
them to do
suggestions
this.
from them.
Yep.
And then they often don't get implemented, or they get delayed for a while, or they get turned into a study. And I'm not saying automatically rubber stamp everything, that's not what I'm saying.
No, sure,
But,
sure.
it's just what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Senator Dooley, Senator Williams.
This was going to pull something up. Yeah, I can give more information because I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but I completely want to eradicate bullying and harm. I was a teacher for 30 years. I'm on a school board. I care so much about kids. I also live in a district that's very diverse and has a lot of poverty, and I'm a senator in a district that has, I've said before, a majority minority school. I've sat as a school board member on an impartial, where I've been an impartial juror to kids who've made mistakes, and their fate has been in my hands. So I take what you're saying extremely seriously. I also see it from another perspective, and I've been front and center for most of my life to the mistakes that kids make and the growing that they do. And I am just really concerned, and I've said this before, that from my vantage point, where I sit, I'm concerned this is going to have unintended consequences in a school to prison pipeline for some of our more, for our students who are marginalized. And that I'm just going to leave it at that, but I feel really strongly about that.
Can I respond to that? So
Sure.
I used to also sit in a school board, and I also had the same position, and I also come from a community whose community is BIPOC, my friends' kids, all of them. And so I don't see how this change will equate to school to prison pipeline. And I think the board talked about it, my executive director talked about, like, there's a difference. It's like the school to prison pipeline, the discipline model is the way. I firmly believe, and it shows in all the work that I do, that I want to hold every student, even those who are doing bullying. My kid could be a bully, my kid could be bullied, right? Like all of them. And the way that this is the shift, it's like, if you say that this is unacceptable, you need to find a way to then have the support for that student who is the bully. And I have friends who get the bullying harassment piece, who are like, my kid did that, and we have to talk about it, and they have to go through the appeal process and whatnot. And at the end, it's like how communities and how our school community sees this work, right? Like, and so I don't think this change is going to send you a school to prison pipeline. I think you share a little bit about, I also work with a lot of teachers in Winooski and South Burlington. So it just doesn't equate, like the discipline is very different than what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is open the door, and the way that schools then work. And so, like, this is the task of the Bullying Harassment Council. How are these policies and procedures being written? Right now, our training that is happening is not adequate. I don't believe.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I'm sorry to everybody that's listening, but I think we are teaching to make sure that we don't get sued. We're not teaching to give resources around. Some schools might be doing it, but not all. So, like, we have a very punitive system. It's like, let's protect our institutions, which is okay, but then what other resources are we doing to build? And it's not just this Creator Restore Justice program. It's not just, like, everything is really connected. Really, it's an ecosystem. Bullying harassment is like one of the pieces of this ecosystem that if we don't connect we're not never gonna solve at the end, you know? So I hear you and I would love to talk more about this with you. And just like share some of the other things that are happening.
So what's the likelihood, it sounds like we're gonna sit and wait for Title IX to come out. I mean, what's the likelihood that it's gonna get more severe as far as regulatory? There's such thing as states' rights. We can make it as severe as we think it's gonna be, rather than wait. Because I'm hearing from you that, I don't know, because I haven't been involved in it, but why we keep waiting, we work, and then we get to a certain point, something changes, and then we have to put it off for you. Just work.
It's a fair point. It's, I think, what Ms. Carson and Senator Schumer were saying. I do share some of Senator Dulick's, and I did say this last meeting, I can see where, just a member, a gay kid could be called some slang word, and that would be awful for that kid to experience. I also just hate to see the kid that did it be put in a situation where all of a sudden, say he did it, or it just, we all know how sensitive these years are, and I want an opportunity for them to learn from that, sit down and talk about it. This is why we don't talk to people that way. That's, I think, the piece, and it goes back to the training, the teachers. Yeah, so we're all just sort of talking about it, and I appreciate this, allowing us to be open with you. It's helpful.
And I think there is a really big piece about age appropriate, right?
And what about disability? I'm just thinking
exactly.
of a nephew, family member who has Asperger's. If they were to shout something out, or if they just hadn't, all those kinds of things.
And I think that this is all the pieces need to be connected, right? So
Yeah.
I give you one case that I know that I'm able to share is that did not go through it was a bullying case. The child was charged with bullying, second grade. Right? So you went through the whole process. The parent said that the process was so bad. It was like a little court
For this little,
for this little
second grader.
kid. The parent who
Yeah.
is a lawyer she said that she's never been in a situation where she was like traumatized with the word she used, because it was like so legally, it was not it was a second grader. I was like,
right.
and so the way the process was, and at the end, she moved, like she's now in a different school, paying a lot of money because her child was not taken care of. But I think it's really important. I'm gonna share my case when I was 16 and I was bullied for 4 months straight.
But just for that first case, that's the kind of thing I think.
Exactly, but it's the age appropriateness, and that's the training that needs to happen. Like
Okay.
how we deal with the
Okay.
case of bullying and harassment in elementary school,
Yeah.
which happens, right? This is why our work around Act 1 is about preschool, because we know that it happens there too, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, but when I was bullied for 3 months straight and I lost it, 3 months, I had enough, I was in bed mode. High school, I got up. I couldn't even speak English, but the words came out. I don't know from where, but they did. And I was really upset. I threw a stapler at them. They didn't hit them, but threw it at the floor and stormed out of the classroom. Then, I was the one hearing the parents, right? Like I was the one that was going to be suspended. I was the one that was going to be disciplined. If it wasn't because other students came to the principal and said, "Do you not notice that she's being bullied for 3 months? Like, here are all the things." They also didn't do anything, right? Because I didn't speak English. So it's like, those are the little things that I have. It's like, it's a shift on school communities. And when I hear some cases that I was like, oh my God, that happened to me 20 years ago, or 30. We're still in this. I think this did not happen in Vermont, but I think that there is just like, that is very relevant to how we build these cases. That could have been different And it's the same thing that happened. I'm like, why did that happen? Why aren't you suspended? What? You were bullied for this many months, and now you're reacting, and how we missed that. It's so I beg you to like think about it more.
Yeah.
I'll talk to my executive director and share today, and then we can submit some written testimony about that. That's great.
Appreciate
Thank you, and thank you for hearing me out.
Yeah. Jay, final comments?
Thank you so much. I wanted to clarify that I was not aware of the Title IX updates and that testimony when I was reading the letter of comment for the Office of Racial Equity. I would have to double check with my executive director to see what the recommendation is from our office, but my inclination would be that it would stay the same, and that this has been a recommendation since September of 2020 and before that even, from the first report of the Racial Equity Task Force. And Senator Hashem, I appreciate your comments about those are comments I've heard echoed by Executive Director Susanna Davis about DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion projects that get started, and we put the work into them, and then they get to the legislature and they get delayed or turned into a study committee because, well, things might change or we need to study this a little more, and it does become frustrating, frankly. But I think one thing that I wanted to comment on is that the severe or pervasive standards are what the schools are measuring their students' conduct against to decide whether they'll take legal action. Amanda, does that sound correct to you? Kind of like schools being like, we're not going to do something about this unless it could get us in legal trouble, basically. Yeah, I think, you know what, I think I'm gonna stop there.
All right, yeah, one of the two of you regroup with folks, and you can be back in contact with Hayden. Let us know what you decide, and we'll again hear from this school board insurance trust as well next week, and talk with our colleagues.
Well, thank you.
Scott, it's great to
Thank
see you.
you.
Jay, good meeting you. Thank you all. Final, Mr. Shapiro.
Yes.
Please, we have about 15 minutes.
Okay.
So we know that we were asked to have you in. The budget is being finalized as we speak, but we said that we could talk to you for about 15 minutes and understand a little bit about your request for appropriation. So we have about,
Thank you.
thank you.
Sophia Downforth, our executive director.
Great,
She's
thank
here.
you.
I'm Andy Shapiro. I'm our energy engineer at Vermont Energy Education Program. I've been doing this work for 25, 30 years. I'm also a design consultant for high performance buildings. That's another hat I wear. VEEP has been in a lot of schools in the state. Over the past 5 years, we've touched probably 80% of the schools. We have a staff of 8. We do energy, climate change, education in these schools. And we have a whole variety of things that we offer for teachers. How electricity is made, how photovoltaics work, how wind power works. We have a unit on transportation. We have a unit on efficiency in houses. We have one on green jobs. We also have increasingly been supporting youth who are interested in doing action projects. So we run the Youth Climate Leadership Academy as well, and work with students and help them. They want to get photovoltaics on their school. They want to lower their carbon footprint, whatever they, I'm the tech support, and then we have other folks who are more specialized in helping them create projects and follow through on them. We have complete kits for all of these units we do, and we provide training for the teachers so that our staff doesn't have to keep going to a school, but we can multiply our efforts that way. We also provide any kind of ongoing support they need. So for example, we ran a unit on Solar Challenge where students designed and built a concentrating solar collector. We ran that for over a decade at the Berry City Elementary School. And during that time, I think we trained 3 sets of teachers who teachers come and go, shift different grade levels or whatever. Right now, we're seeing a big need for public education as well as expanding our efforts. We can't really meet all the demand we have. And where we're trying to move the climate action plan forward, we feel like it's going to be very important to have public education as well. So we've been getting requests to go to a library or a Grange, and it's really outside our current funding ability. The climate action plan says, quote, education is a vital part of solving the climate crisis, and it strengthens the success of every other pathway toward resilient climate adaptation. Show you a little bit of what we do. Every year we produce a brochure that tells about all our different programs. And then on the inside, it's a poster. So it doesn't become recycled, but it goes up on the wall of the classroom. This is a recent one. What can you do as a student? What are some of the things you could do? Pass it around if you like. This is one of my favorites, and I'm the data guy in this poster. So this one is, what is the energy impact and the carbon dioxide emission impact of all different ways to get to school? Walking, bicycling, e-bike, e-car with, that's full, e-car with one student in it, school bus, diesel, full, half full, electric school bus, half full, SUV with one student in it. We used this in a class, a middle school, recently, and the kids surveyed themselves, and then we figured out how much carbon dioxide was emitted from their transportation for the week, and it was a balloon 4 feet in diameter and 60 feet long. So we actually made one of those and blew it up in the hallway, and then we looked at ways we could shrink that footprint. This one is about thinking about where electricity comes from. And you can think about it in a lot of different ways. And this is what we try and do, is stimulate the kids to really think on these things. So this one is what's generated in the state. This one's what our local utilities actually purchase for sale in the state. And this one's what's in the ISO New England, New England-wide grid. So that's another one. I will pass out our testimony here, and then I'll also get it to you electronically.
Okay, I was gonna ask if there was a specific ask in here.
There is.
That's great.
Yeah, and this asks for 458,000. Do you want to fill in on that, Sophia?
I certainly can. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Thank you so much for making time for us this afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person with the reschedule. I have small children I needed to be here in Burlington for, but thank you for making time for us. My name is Sophia Danforth. I'm the director of Veep, and our request is a one-time request for $458,000 to do two things. One is to really get into all of the K-12 schools across the state. We're doing pretty well. We've been in roughly 80% over the course of the last 5 years, but you got to remember that might be one classroom in a school. And so we feel like there is a greater need. We are indeed hearing from schools that they would really like this to be happening more, but cost is an issue. So we're looking for ways to make that more cost effective for schools and really expand our reach entirely across the state. And the second piece is to make these really important tools and data and the processing of that data available to adults as well. And I got this firsthand at an energy fair last fall, where I was working some of the tools that Andy's about to show you with a group of 10-year-olds. And our focus is on trying to get the 10-year-olds to understand what's going on with electricity. But really what's happening is in the circle of parents that are surrounding it saying, oh, wait a minute, that's how that works. Wait, where does the power come from and what's happening at the generator plant, right? And just recognizing that there's a whole lot of this stuff that is not readily available to us as citizens coming through K-12 education, and that the adults are the ones who are, of course, making choices now about transportation, about how they heat their homes, about all of these things that we know need to change in the face of what's going on with our climate. So we really see the Climate Action Plan as needing an education arm, and we think that Veep is already offering those services in a K-12 space, and we're asking for an investment from the state to really make this statewide within our schools and available to adults as well. So the packet that Andy has
Julie.
passed around.
Senator Gulick has a question.
Sorry,
But
hi,
yeah,
thank you for being here. Could you share with us what your typical funding looks like year to year, and where it comes from and all of that? I still don't have a good sense.
Yeah.
of that.
certainly. So our budget runs just over $500,000 right now, but remember that funds work that's happening in 2 states. We have a New Hampshire arm as well. The 2 single largest pieces of our budget comes from a contract with Efficiency Vermont and a similar contract on the New Hampshire side with the utilities there. Those are focused entirely on school-age children. So we can't tap into that for the more general education part of things. And both of those contracts have been steadily shrinking over the last several years, despite the increased need for this. We make up the rest of our income in a mixture of grants from smaller private foundations and a tiny percentage from what we charge schools. Last year, we took in $35,000 in program fees out of a budget of just over 500,000.
We get about 100 from Efficiency Vermont, and that number has been going down every year since their budget is flatlined, and so ours has been decreasing.
Senator Williams.
Is this program vetted through the Agency of Education?
The Agency of Education is well aware of our work, and they're very supportive of it. We use exemplary.
That's what I asked. Is there a requirement to be vetted to get education funds?
So
I don't know the answer whether that's required, but we could certainly.
Danforth, do you want to add anything to Senator Williams' question?
I think what might be relevant here is, there isn't like an accreditation process that we've gone through the AOE. That's not something that they offer currently, but everything that we are offering is aligned with the next generation science standards, which is what the state has adopted. So everything that we are offering is directly in line with what the AOE has said they want happening in schools.
So are you a nonprofit?
Yes.
And who backs your nonprofit financially?
Well, like I said, we get what, approximately 100,000 from Efficiency Vermont.
That's correct.
Do you want to talk about some of the other larger ones that apply to Vermont?
Yeah, sure. So we have a small contract, just over $10,000 each year from Vermont Gas Systems currently. That's just been renewed. We've worked with Velco in the past as well. And then I have a long list of private foundations. The Couch Foundation, the Door Foundation, Mergens are the 3 most recent ones to come through. But that's a big part of my job is talking to all those people and keeping us afloat.
And Transportation Department also, right?
We have 1 large contract through the Vermont Agency of Transportation at the moment.
Yeah, please. Do you have a partnership with corporations like Green Mountain Power?
Well, one of our board members is Green Mountain Power person there, and he finds when they've got some money somewhere that can be sent to us, he'll find it for us. So yeah, we do have a relationship with them.
We thank you. Senator Perchlik is working on this. He is your probably biggest advocate. I know it didn't work out last year, and I frankly don't know what will happen this year, but they did ask that we have you in to hear so the committee members could get a better sense of your work.
Right.
I think we have done.
So
Yes, please, Senator Weeks.
just a question. So I understand that primarily your efforts are centered around the climate action plan. That's the prime focus.
It's more broadly educational around.
Right. The educational realm, right. That's right. And I think it's a great program. The educational materials you just passed around are phenomenal. They're really very good. I noticed in your education programs, you've highlighted solar, wind, hydro. That's appropriate. How do you teach, or do you teach nuclear?
When we talk about how electricity is generated, we start with a coil and a magnet, cow magnets, and then gradually move to other coil and magnets, and eventually up to these little generators, which are visible generators, where you can It's got the coils and magnets that students can see, and you can see that it generates electricity. Right at the magnet there. And then we talk about the number of ways you could turn this. We can put a turbine on here, put some squirrels in there, that's not too good. And you can run hydro over it. And the way that most thermal electricity is generated is making steam to turn this. And we have a pressure cooker that I hacked to put a steam jet on the front, and we actually run it that way. And then we show, well, what are the ways you can heat that steam? You can heat it with wood, you can heat it with oil, gas, or nuclear. And so that's where we bring that in.
I guess I'm just curious, everybody has a bit of a spin. I'm just curious if your spin on nuclear is positive or a negative.
We try not to spin. We try and say, here's the pluses and minuses. And every form of generation has pluses and minuses. And we have the students talk about what those are, what they know about them, and we don't make a value judgment.
Very good. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good program.
Thank you. Yeah, we have things all the way from K to 12. So, you know, it's the kindergarten, they just want to look and see what a magnet will do. You know, they're all familiar with magnets. And then once you get up into a high school level, we can put the wind blades on here, and students can design wind blade systems for this. And we have a fan and an anemometer that we got from NRG Systems in Heinsberg, who makes, you know, real anemometers. And the students can track the wind speed versus the output and actually do a calculation of a curve, a generation curve, a power curve for the wind generator. So we have things for all levels.
Believe it or not, I learned this stuff in elementary school. I had a science teacher that was really into this.
That's
It's
great.
amazing. Yeah.
We get kids in junior high who never seen this. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you both for coming in. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I hope you can pass a recommendation along to the appropriations
we're gonna have
board.
a conversation with them.
That would be fabulous. Thanks for your time. I know
Thank
you're all
you.
busy.
No, appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
It's a stuff intensive business we're in.
Gizmo.
All right.